Hi, guys. So, we're traveling, and I don't have my laptop with me, so I can't read you my little script that I say in the beginning to cover all bases. So, essentially, welcome to book club. I'm glad you're here. Um, I am not a professional narrator, and this book um, has some tough language and some gore and violence, descriptive, violent situations and nasty little words. So if that is offensive to you, then don't watch. But if you have ever wanted to be in a book club and just never found the time to read, I'll read for us, and I'll do my best. And I love how we get to talk about it in the chat. Hi, Mary. There's some rad folks who gather here. Hello, Craig. I'm so glad to see you. I missed you yesterday and was worried. And I'm so glad to see you. Happy day. So, yes, you want to see where I'm at? It's a mess, but there's Nuisance's logo. And the godfather of one of my boys is in this band, and they're pretty rad out of Minneapolis. Or no, St. Paul. Criminy. Uncle Shags. Here's his monitors, but shout out to Shags for letting me, well, he didn't know I'd be doing this, but he let us stay. So I'm seizing an opportunity for cool lights instead of just glaring, unflattering overhead light. Staying off the grids. Hello. Oh my goodness. I'm married with kids. Oh, kind of married. It's not. It's not. No, I might need to plug my phone in. We'll see how long it goes. If I disconnect abruptly, then I'll see you tomorrow. All right. So I just, I can take the heat. I was talking, I hit Abby up because I was like, I wanted her to tell me what she thought, because I was worried. I thought that I had burned a bridge with you because I don't know if it was confrontational, but I was told it seemed confrontational, and I appreciate you so much, and you helped me maintain my chipper disposition by weeding out the trolls in the chat. I can take a little heat, but not like that nonsense. It's always something like that, though. It's like they got a script. But look, I wished there was a light that was on in front of me, and that was the one that blinked through different colors. So anyway, I don't know. They all say the same thing. They all say that and they think they're dunking on folks, and really it's just redundant. See? Plasma zombie. You keep coming back. That's cool. Good to see y'all. All right, and I'm going to just dive in, I guess. We're chapter 10. I can't wait for chapter 11 because it's literally mind control. But this one, the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic. No, we are traveling. This is a friend's place, and their band is called Nuisance out of St. Paul. Yes, Plasma Zombie, I did. You missed it. Hi, J-Dope. That's funny because your name reminds me of Two Dope, Shaggy Two Dope, and I'm here at my friend Shags's place. We call him Shaggy. So, too bad. Maybe it'll happen again. You should wait and see. All right, chill out, Billy. I don't need your assistance. Are you worried? She's like, where are we, Mom? It smells funny. Speaking of which, it's way over there. I had an incense cone going, but it was done in like 10 minutes. Don't bark at me. Go upstairs. Go on. Don't be rude or lay down. Lay down. You chill. Lay down all the way. Chill out. Chill out. Oh, I like this chair too. Man, if I wasn't manifesting this. Oh, and I have a TV back here, so I pulled up my channel. I wanted to see what it looked like when I went live. Let me do that quick. Let's go back. Is that the back button? I'm like, what a cool setup. Look at this. What if I, at some point, had like a screen behind me with my logo, and I was just like, what's up, guys? It's me. Man, then I wouldn't need an encoder. All right. It's enough horsing around. Hey, let's read. The chair farted. I love it. Oh, so this is Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. This is the book we're reading now. I've got playlists for all the books that I've read, if you're into that sort of thing. But I feel like catching us live, me and then us in the chat, because I feel like that's the heart of book club, is getting to like think about this kind of thing. And it's so relevant. It's just unfolding as as it unfolds, you draw many conclusions. Like you see the process the CIA takes. You can see their signature on things like current events. Do with what you've got. Yes. So Poke King, welcome if you're still here. All right, let's dive in. So too many Smiths. To tell the story of Manson properly, as I'd argue Bugliosi never did, you've got to familiarize with a dauntingly large cast, as it is clear by now. When I was preparing to turn my aborted premiere story into a book, I realized just how frustrating it was to keep everyone straight, to tell the narrative in a way that gave its major players their due without getting mired in details. Because in a scene, in a sense, I'll start there. Listen, so Candace, what's that guy's name? Crap, is it Andrew? Or whatever, he was just on Rogan. Blake was like, ooh, this is a good watch, something to think about or thought-provoke, whatever he said. It was such fluff. But they're saying, like, Candace hasn't brought a single piece of evidence. And you can say that, and the people who haven't watched her can be like, that's what I now know. And they argue that. But she's brought so much evidence. What? Golden winged spirit orb, welcome back. I don't know what you're saying. Are you just like dropping bars in the chat, or what are we doing? Cool. Thanks. I'm glad you're deciding to chill. It's as tiny as Andrew Wilson. Is that his name? Andrew Wilson? She showed a clip of him on the What's Up podcast. And what an embarrassment. She owned him, and he was like really upset and emotional, clearly, because she brought up his wife. Anyway, so something to watch if you want, later, because stay here. Anyway, so because I almost dropped the book, in a sense, the details were everything. The lassune and silences and seemingly irrelevant detours in Manson's life made it clear that he was far from a product of his times and his surroundings than something as outrageous as the Helter Skelter motive would have you believe. That motive makes it seem like Manson and the family lived in a vacuum, but during their formative years in San Francisco, by most accounts, they were part of the zeitgeist. To understand that zeitgeist, I had to deal with the sheer proliferation of names, hundreds and hundreds of names. It's a confusing story to tell because it involves two Smiths. Two Smiths. That ought to be on my red leather, yellow leather list. Two Smiths. Dave Smith. Anyway, let me not skip ahead. And they ran in the same circles. Both were drug researchers with a sociological interest in the Haight-Ashbury youth scene. On top of Roger Smith, Manson's parole officer, there was Dave Smith, no relation, the charismatic creator of the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic. You wouldn't think that Manson, a Chari ex-con who disdained conventional power structures, would spend a lot of time at a government-funded clinic, no matter how groovy its trappings. But Manson and the girls were at the HAFMC a lot. When they moved from the disused school bus into a proper apartment, he chose one right around the corner from the clinic. His involvement with that place and the extent to which it dovetails with both the Smiths, with both the Smiths, has been serially unexplored in popular writing on him. Because Bugliosi seemed to have no use for the Smiths, no one else did either. But having seen how crucial Roger was to Manson's development, I knew I had to dive into David's history too. So Mr. Dave instead of Mr. Smith. Hi, Bendy. Welcome. Andrew's wife is a beast also. That's what she was essentially saying on the, he didn't let her get many words in, and I'm sure she knew enough. And I'm sure he was like, whoa, you know, she's been married 3 times. Maybe we'll nip this in the bud by calling her a B word and a D word. And I mean, I guess I could swear. I said this isn't for kids. Anyway, I'm spoiled right now with this chair. I want to take it with me. Anyway, serially unexplored, Bugliosi, but having seen how crucial Roger is. Okay, Mr. Dave, right. David Elvin Smith grew up in the dusty farm community of Bakersfield, California, at the southern end of the San Joaquin Valley. When he moved to the Bay Area in 1960s to study at UC Berkeley, why'd I put an S at the end of that 60? Anyway, Smith was, by his own admission, a hick. He'd never traveled much beyond his backwoods town, and he lacked the political and intellectual curiosity that animated Berkeley's sophisticated international student body. Had it not been for his pushy peers, always scolding him for missing their sit-ins and marches, Smith probably wouldn't have noticed the dawn of the free speech movement on his own campus. Later, he tried to remember a teaching assistant who canceled class so he and the other students could head to the protest downtown. Smith refused to join. He wanted to study for an upcoming test. The TA told him he'd never get an A if he didn't go. Smith had been open about his louche behavior in this period. An inveterate, like I said at the opening, not many people were on, but I'm not a professional narrator or reader, but I do like to read. So, and I have dyslexia and ADHD. So I skip around a bit, but I feel like I make it so you can follow me. You can follow along. Yes, the whole world is being deceived. Golden-winged spirit orb. Hi, welcome. 2007. All right. Good to see you back. Where was I? Smith had been open about his louche behavior in this period. An inveterate womanizer and a binge drinker, he disappeared for days at a time on benders, nevertheless graduating at the top of his class. At the end of 1965, a debilitating blackout and a messy breakup led him to give up alcohol. By then, Smith, a raffish, good-looking man of 26, was a postdoctoral student at UC San Francisco and the chief of the Alcohol and Drug Abuse Screening Unit at San Francisco General Hospital. Later, he remembered his curiosity flaring as his research collided with the city's cultural upheaval. I was injecting white rats with LSD in this lab, he said, and then I'd walk home past the Haight, where I'd see kids who were high on the same substance. He began to experiment with psychedelics himself, and he liked them. The lifestyle brought new friends and new politics. He and his friends tracked the burgeoning counterculture in the Haight, where some were predicting an influx of 100,000 young people in the coming year. Smith, who felt that healthcare was a right, wondered where the newcomers would receive medical attention and how they would afford it. Afford it. Oh. Dang it, see, and I look away and it's gone. It just, 100,000 people, there we go. He moved to Haight-Ashbury himself with plans to found a free clinic. All right, did that just turn off? Nope. All right, I turned it off. I wonder if that, does that change the light? Whoa, look, I have green shadow. All right, I just noticed. You got here late. Dakota, welcome. Your family loves me? Amazing. This is what I'm reading now, Tom O'Neill's book, Chaos. There's a Netflix special. I had already read it. I read it when the JFK files dropped, and then Charlie Kirk. And I moved and I packed the book, so I had to buy a new one. So this will be the second time I'm reading it, because I did a poll and this won, and I vetoed that win, and I read The Devil's Chessboard previous to this, and now we're about halfway through, a little more than halfway through it. But I have playlists per book. Hi, Mike. Well, I'm always on at midnight. Yeah, well, I mean, I have a link for the book club list of books where you can purchase. You don't have to, though, because I'll read it to you. You can listen to it with your little earbuds in, or whatever, however you watch. But you can get the book too and follow along, or read at your own pace. It's really cool to like talk about these things as we go and connect. You can speak freely, Vincent. It's funny, the guy who sings for this band is named Vince. He's a pretty cool dude. They're all cool dudes. So, ooh, and that drum kit, let's see. Can I show you it? Oh, you can't see the front. Maybe I'll show it at the end. We'll do a tour of some of the cool stuff in this band room that I took over. All right, and we're going. So he began to experiment, with himself. When it opened, the free clinic he founded at 558 Clayton Street in June of '67, the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, HAFMC, was an immediate sensation. Staffed entirely by volunteers and unauthorized by the city health department, it treated hundreds of patients a day, offering non-judgmental care for those suffering from bad trips, overdoses, sexually transmitted diseases, and malnourishment, or for those who just needed a kind ear. Lines at the HAFMC sometimes stretched around the block, with hippies waiting to ascend the creaky wooden stairs to its second-floor office. Inside, loitering was encouraged. The clinic did everything it could to advertise its psychedelic affinities. Exam rooms were painted in aqua and day-glow orange. One of them was wallpapered with a vibrant collage of peace signs, naked bodies, and hypnotic swirls. Even as Smith struggled to pay the rent and keep the cops at bay, he reveled in his creation. Few things so perfectly encapsulated the utopian ideals of the summer of love. As faces filed in and out of the clinic that summer, Smith and his colleagues befriended the repeat visitors, and the HAFMC became a scene within a scene. It could be hard to tell the hippies apart with their long, beflowered hair, their upstart communes, their shifting legions of followers and leaders. But decades later, no one at the clinic had any trouble remembering Charlie Manson and his girls. Negate your ego. In 1971, David Smith published Love Needs Care, a memoir of the HAFMC's germinal years. He is germinal years, germinal. All right. Let me take a minute. Oh my goodness. Hi, Chucky. Anyway. All right. Maybe I should start over. I had mentioned it before. Sometimes, like, I see ahead of where I'm reading. And sometimes I'm looking back on what I just read. Like, wow, I stumbled that word, and then I have to, like, refocus and get in front of the thing, the sentence, my eyes. So I'm going to start that over. In 1971, David Smith published Love Needs Care, a memoir of the HAFMC's germinal years. I found it rife with details about Manson and the family and about the very period that Bugliosi had omitted from the Helter Skelter, the Summer of Love, when Manson, apparently at his most charismatic, began to attract followers and ensure their unconditional devotion. Better still, Love Needs Care had a few contributions from Roger Smith offering his own appraisal of Manson. As invaluable as these portraits are, though, I called them into question when my reporting led me to doubt both of the Smiths. The more I read certain passages, the more they seemed like gingerly public relations efforts. The Smiths had to make it clear that they knew Manson well and that they had felt some sympathy towards him. There could be no denying that, given how often they had been seen together. But the book came 2 years after the murders, when both men had an interest in distancing themselves from that Manson, the murderous one, the metaphor of evil or for evil. Love Needs Care attempts to the delicate task of elucidating the Smiths' relationships to Manson while making it seem as if they had no idea that he and his followers would someday erupt into unconscionable violence. David Smith described the family's frequent trips to the HAFMC, where Charlie's girls, as they were known around the halls, were treated for sexually transmitted diseases and unwanted pregnancies. The girls tended to Manson's every need, never speaking unless spoken to. They referred to him as Christ or JC. When the family moved to an apartment on Cole Street, Manson began in earnest to reprogram his followers. David had an elaborate sense of Manson's tactics, although he never explained where he got it. Using a combination of LSD and mind games, Manson forced his followers to submit to unconventional sexual practices, Smith wrote. He would invoke mysticism and pop psychology as the acid took hold, saying, "You have to negate your ego," treating the girls like objects. He eroded their independence, turning them into self-acknowledged computers, empty vessels that would accept almost anything he poured in. Before long, they obeyed him unquestioningly. Acid was unmistakably essential to the process, which is why Bob and Bill W., Dr. Bob and Bill W., wanted to use psychedelics as a permanent recovery for addiction, because they use the programming, the indoctrination, the repeated phrases. It's a 12-step program. And with psychedelics, with LSD specifically, they said it would have been a permanent recovery, and that's what drove me out of the rooms. Anyway, essential to the process, Manson's insistence on it sometimes put him at odds with trends in the Haight, David thought. Typically, hippies who dropped a lot of acid eventually moved on to speed. A schism grew in the scene. The acid heads, a phrase David claims to have coined, favored nonviolence, whereas the speed freaks, ditto, caused the rash of violence that destroyed the Haight live, let live ethos. But Manson had an aversion to needles. He wouldn't use amphetamines. The family's drug pattern was effectively reversed, with Manson urging his disciples to relinquish speed and embrace acid. Weaning his recruits from amphetamines reduced the chances of interference with his induction process. Speed became part of the family's lifestyle only later, David told me, when it came time to kill in Los Angeles. He'd heard this from Susan Atkins herself when she asked him to access her mental health for a parole hearing in 78. Her mental health, records? Or just access her mental health? All right. When they went to the South, they got very deeply involved in speed, he said. They got it from the Hells Angels. They were trading sex for speed, and Atkins thinks that Helter Skelter and the ultimate crime was a paranoid speed delusion. Bugliosi kept any mention of the family's speed use out of the trial. David thought he understood why. It risked presenting mitigating circumstances for the prosecution, and the defense wouldn't want it coming up either. No one wants his or her clients to look like addicts. Both the Smiths have said that Manson's fear of needles made speed a non-issue. But obviously, speed can be taken orally or snorted. Over the years, a smattering of evidence and first-hand recollections has suggested that the family used amphetamines more often than it was suggested at the time. In a 2009 documentary, Linda Kasabian claimed that she and her companions each swallowed a capsule of speed before leaving for CeeLo Drive on the night of Sharon Tate's murder. At the trial, she testified that she hadn't taken any drugs around the time of the murders. In books and at parole hearings, Susan Atkins also later copped to taking speed before the Tate murders. Tex Watson wrote that he frequently snorted it with the group, and that he too took it on both nights of the murders. Others added that the families kept an abundance of speed at the Spahn Ranch towards the end of their time there, and that Manson himself wasn't above taking it, especially as he grew more paranoid. He would use it to stay up for days at a time, brooding on his delusions. Remember, Manson lived in the Haight because Roger Smith sent him there, thinking its vibes would assuage the con man's hostility. And make no mistake, Roger did believe that Manson was hostile. In a short essay for Life magazine published months after the murders, Roger offered his first ever insights about Manson. He speaks of Manson here out of his extensive unofficial contact with him, the magazine noted, without describing the nature of the contact or any potential conflicts with Smith's parole duties. With Smith's, yeah, I read it right. Charlie was the most hostile parolee I ever came across, Roger wrote. He told me right off there was no way he could keep the terms of his parole. He was headed back to the joint and there was no way out of it. Roger would seldom write or speak about Manson again, wanting to distance himself from the most infamous client. When I first spoke to him in 2001, I was only the third reporter to do so, but his remark about Manson's hostility always stayed with me. I had already seen, after all, how he had characterized Manson in official parole documents as a well-behaved guy making excellent progress. The disparity suggested that Roger had been willing to sweep Manson's hostility under the rug. In a passage he contributed to Love Needs Care, Roger did his best to support the idea that the bizarreries. I've never heard that word before. Can you not see me here? Let's tuck in. Bizarreries? I have never in my life. Where was it? Hostility. Where was it? Bizarreries of the Haight suited an ex-con like Manson. Oh, like, all right. Manson, nope, daily LSD trips made him mellower, more thoughtful. He still had the slick duplicitousness of a con man, and he was still a master manipulator, but he was suddenly fond of vacuous self-help bromides. Like, if you love everything, you don't need to think about what bothers you. Roger Smith couldn't seem too credulous, so he made sure to note the messianic tilt of Manson's acid days, an oblique acknowledgement of Charlie's growing megalomania. David Smith mirrored the sentiment, writing that Manson's LSD trips replaced his underlying depression with a manic smile. That sometimes betrayed darker philosophies. David admitted that Manson began to develop a number of delusions as his involvement with LSD progressed. He fantasized about the Beatles ordaining him their musical equal, He imagined a judgment day when blacks would slaughter whites. Some of Roger's familiars, including his wife, couldn't understand his affinity for Manson. Roger was pretty much in awe of Charlie's ability to draw these women to him. One said. Another thought that he, quote, was always kind of fascinated with the charming, charismatic sociopath. After Manson's role in the Haight-LaBianca murders came out, Roger allowed that he had made an error in bringing him to the Haight. But at the time, the family enjoyed a remarkable kinship with Roger. They swarmed over Roger Smith and often filled the clinic reception room, David Smith wrote, bringing operations to a standstill. Roger didn't mind the adulation, in part, David claimed, because Charlie frequently offered him the services of his harem. Roger declined this offer. Among the HAFMC alumni I spoke to, the understanding was that Manson had visited the clinic on many occasions to see Roger for their mandatory, what am I saying, parole meetings. Roger himself would later claim that the family simply came out of the blue for no particular reason, and that they didn't begin seeing him there until after his duties as Manson's parole officer had ended. In either case, something about the arrangement didn't sit well with me. One reason the HAFMC was free, after all, was that David, Roger, and their colleagues had received private and federal grants to conduct drug research there. The Smiths were both studying amphetamines and LSD, the latter being the crucial component in Manson's reprogramming process. How had an uneducated ex-con, someone who months ago had never taken acid or maybe never even heard of it, come to use the drug to such sophisticated ends? And wasn't it suspicious, at least, that he was coming to the HAFMC to see two people who were studying that very phenomenon, the use of drugs to control and change behavior? At least one friend of Roger's had foreseen that it would be a conflict of interest. Quote, I always thought there would be a problem. Another noted, Roger had really made a career at that point in trying to help Manson. He was going to soothe the savage beast. Instead, the beast grew more savage than ever. Frenzied attacks on unrelenting rage. Frenzied attacks of unrelenting rage. When he launched the HAFMC, David Smith left a loose end dangling in his past. He never actually received his PhD in pharmacology. He'd completed a 2-year research project on amphetamines and their effects on groups of confined mice, but he never finished his dissertation. Although he shrugged off the lapse, he already completed medical school, after all, and he had taken quickly to his new life in the Haight. It surprised many of his closest friends. I always put weird T's and S's at the ends of words. What is that? Stay happy because life is for that. Who's Roger Smith again? He is the parole officer who only had Abigail, thank you. Coming in clutch. Yes, thank you. I was about to read all that too. Matt Short. Bizarre quality, bizarreries on Haight. And I was almost thinking like maybe it was a word like haberdashery, like a hat maker. Ari at the end is like the service and sales of the thing. Bizarreries. Haberdasheries. Haberdasher is like the hat maker, right? And then haberdashery is where he sells his wares. So that's what I was thinking. But is that like, that's what we call a bazaar, right? Bizarreries. Weird. Thank you for looking that up, and thank you for keeping tabs on the spam. Marlon Brando. Cardi. Welcome. You just got out of prison, Milton. Congrats. Do better. You can. Do better. And keep coming back here, and you can stay in the know about cool stuff. Dorian, hello. Talons, Apocalypse Now. Frenzied attacks of unrelenting rage. When he launched David Smith, he let, okay, loose ends. He didn't even have a PhD. He couldn't finish school, although he shrugged off the lapse. He had already completed medical school after all, and he'd taken quickly to his new life in the Haight. It surprised many of his closest friends in our interviews that he was reluctant to admit it. It wasn't like him to leave something undone. Even in its unpublished form, Smith's research on mice defined him, creating the larger-than-life personality who would eventually be known as Dr. Dave. In my obsessive way, I found as much of this research as I could. I saw that Smith had published a brief article based on his study in the HAFMC's own house organ, the Journal of Psychedelic Drugs, in 1969. It wasn't nearly as robust as his full thesis would have been, but it gave me something to go on. Before long, I was noticing parallels between Smith's mice and the family. At first, I was inclined to disregard these as the product of my more speculative side. I saw no purpose in linking the behavior of mice in a controlled experiment to the behavior of people in the world at large, but I took another look when I saw that Smith himself had made such a connection. He spoke of his mice as proxies for human beings. His research started with 16 albino mice. With the assistance of other researchers, he separated these into 2 groups of 8 in aggregate settings, small, closely confined communities intended to simulate crowding. Then he injected the mice with amphetamines. Over the next 24 hours, they transformed from docile animals into frantic combatants, fighting one another until they died either from injuries, self-inflicted wounds from overgrooming, or simple exhaustion. The violence was unrelenting, unremitting. There was a dash there. Sorry about that. Shout out to the mods. Yes. You read 1984 in 6th grade. Excellent. You had some good teachers. See, and people often reference 1984, and I'm like, but have you read Animal Farm? And that book, I mean, I feel like it's more relevant. They're both good, but I feel like Animal Farm, me and my boys read that one together. Abigail. Excellent. Adam, good to meet you. Welcome. All right. They were fighting frenzied attacks. All right. The violence was unremitting. Smith described frenzied attacks of unrelenting rage. Afterward, all that remained in the blood-splattered cages were scattered, dismembered body parts, simply by confining the animals in close quarters. I wonder, was he left with one, or the one probably ended up grooming himself to death or dying of exhaustion? Anyway, in another attempt, some of the mice were dosed with other chemicals, mescaline, chlorpromazine, or reserpine, before they received amphetamine injections. The extra drugs sometimes had a sorting effect, segregating the mice that would kill from the mice that wouldn't, or they had a soothing effect, all but eliminating the violent tendencies. Smith told me he'd started his research having foreseen an influx of amphetamine abusers in San Francisco. He didn't say how he'd predicted that influx, but he was right. It's almost like maybe they were provided the drugs, kind of like crack. Or, in my opinion, in Colorado, and who knows wherever else, but I saw it happen, an influx of GHB delivered through the hippies at the hippie bar. Jay Bianchi just got 11 years in prison for that stuff. And I lived across the street from the main hippie bar in Denver, Sancho's Broken Arrow. down with those guys. And I'm so glad he got prison time. But Denver is notorious for not testing rape kits, and I think that's an issue. Thank you, D. Vincent. I'm not the best reader, but I do it. And I think it's better when it's not perfect. And they try to saturate us with like AI entertainment and music and videos and stuff, and it's nice to share some reality with you guys. And I have this I forgot my phone stand, so I'm borrowing. It is, and I fell victim to people playing around with that stuff quite often. Like I said, I lived across the street from that bar, and I had no idea what was happening to me. I would just be there, and then I'd wake up at home or elsewhere. And I don't want to get into it too deeply, but that shit was gnarly. And I mean, and it seemed like a social experiment because of how weird the setup was. And it was always like, if you're new in town, oh, go see the hippies, or, you know, stinking hippies. Cosplaying is nice people, and punks cosplay is dangerous, mean people. That's how it feels. Not to say there aren't tried and true, like, real life hippies. To these people, it seemed more like an aesthetic than anything else. Or I don't know. Denver. It sure went to shit, man. What a tragedy. That place falling apart. COVID really did a number on it. I want to put my legs up, but this chair like leans back too far. I feel like I'm gonna fall off. And I'm on a pedestal in this like studio. Whoops. Hi, Ricky. Yes. Huzzah, hooray. Vincent, I'm glad you subbed. Stick around. Yeah, Frank Zappa. What an interesting fellow, just living art. All right, I feel that way about Oliver Tree also. I feel like in hindsight, people are going to look back at him and be like, dang, he had some prolific music. And his whole life was a piece of art. Like Mike Patton or Prince, you know? Plasma Zombie, a bit grease would help. What? Oh, the chair? You hear it. Yes. All right. We're over here. Smith told me he had started his research having foreseen an influx of amphetamine. Oh, yeah, that's why I was like, they were dosing communities. You know, double blind study. That's like a triple, quadruple blind study. Bill Hicks. See, I used to love Bill Hicks, but I realized he was a little... But I guess it's a sign of the times, you know. But he talked about young girls sexually in a way that really kind of shined a light on how it was sort of normalized back in the 90s. I didn't know what you meant. I thought you were like, I need to grease my hair or something. I'm like, it's not poofy today. And then I thought about Grease because Justin, I don't know what band it is, but there's a hard rock band that covers Grease's music. So, anyway. All right, back to it. So when the speed scene hit, it was a total shock to everybody, he told me. Suddenly, what I had learned in pharmacology relative to amphetamines was applicable to people. Throughout Love Needs Care, Smith draws parallels between the rodents he'd studied and the speed-addled hippies in the Haight. The mice on speed, he wrote, became inordinately aggressive and assaultive, turning upon one another with unexpected savagery. Their violent behavior is possibly intensified by confinement, for it is strikingly similar to that observed in amphetamine abusers who consume the drugs in crowded atmospheres. In the Haight, Smith watched as people living cheek by jowl took huge doses of speed, inspiring paranoia and hallucinations. once peaceful and well-adjusted, the speed freaks of San Francisco now lashed out with murderous rage at any real or imagined intrusion, assaulting, raping, torturing, to relieve the paranoid tension. Oh, everybody says grape. And even though I like start with a disclaimer, I haven't had anything pulled off YouTube since the protocols. Jesse. You thought so? Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I thought he was just profound. And listening to him talk about Goat Boy. And then I love Jim Brewer, who took Goat Boy in the direction he took it, but he took it out of a pedophile's hands, maybe, and that gives him a, that's okay. But I always thought, like, how did nobody catch that? How did nobody clock him taking Goat Boy from Bill Hicks? Even though Bill Hicks was talking about little girls, which is horrific. You're going to rest? I'm going to rest and listen. Thanks for your public service and reading. Interesting book. Well, thank you for seeing value in it. I'm glad you do. All right, she blasted. Hope he takes it. Yes, Dakota. I'm so glad she did. I wonder if you rewound. I am drinking water. I have a to-go cup. It's my favorite to use for water later. Charlie was the last straw. They keep going, but they're floundering. I see you, Vincent, and I'll keep you in mind. All right, Philly man clips. I invited somebody who was very angry with me, and we went back and forth a lot. And I said, "Come to the chat." So if we see, it was like a 3-name name. I'll recognize it when I see it. I think his name is James, Jerry, and he called me Mandy. I'm like, I don't appreciate that. I've never been a Mandy. It's a whole different name. It's not even my name. Charles Manson is the vibe here, friend, and I'm gonna get back to reading. We're deep into the drug culture of the 60s. All right, and I was saying words that might get me some heat from YouTube, and I cut away. Oh yeah. Cut off from the straight world, crammed together in inhuman conditions and controlled by chemicals, Smith concluded. They behaved quite naturally, like rats in a cage. Like rats in a cage, despite all my rage. But when I spoke to Smith, he was quick to discount these parallels. Quote, I happened to study amphetamines before they hit the Haight, he said. The Haight didn't give me the idea. It's kind of like a historical accident. I was studying LSD before LSD hit the Haight too. In fact, according to Dr. Eugene Schoenfeld, who participated in a portion of Smith's rat research in 1965, LSD was an integral component of the project. Smith and his colleagues would inject the rats with acid in hopes of making them more suggestible before he gave them amphetamines. Suggestibility was among the most prized effects of LSD from a clinical perspective, and yet Smith kept LSD out of the official documentation of his research. The article he published in the Journal of Psychedelic Drugs never mentioned acid. I asked Smith if LSD was part of his protocol. He denied it then. A moment later, without provocation, he reversed himself. Yeah, I stuck LSD in them, he said, but he couldn't explain why. I was sticking all different kinds of drugs in them, he added. In his recollection, LSD produced disorganized behavior, but not violent behavior. The rats would just wander around in a daze, probably thinking how beautiful everything was. Like, dang. Probably realizing they're rats, you know? Like, holy smokes, I'm a rat? That's probably what was happening. That's what happened when I used it. I was like, whoa, I'm a human. I'm meat and bones. And I breathe. Who's Amanda? I'm Amanda. There's a joke. All right. I asked Smith. Nope. Already read that. All right. If you've noticed that I've used rats and mice interchangeably, there's a reason for that. Smith used them interchangeably too, even though the two species have vastly different behavioral patterns, especially in groups. In his Journal of Psychedelic Drugs article, he calls them mice. In Love Needs Care, another book he published, they're rats. Schoenfeld insisted that he'd worked with rats during his part of the research, but Smith was adamant that they were mice, and he couldn't explain his confusion on the subject. Like the San Francisco Project and Roger Smith's amphetamine research project, ARP, funny, AARP, some of David Smith's research, according to his academic papers, was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, which, as mentioned earlier, later acknowledged the CIA used it as a front for LSD research. And though David never mentioned it in his writing, his work owed a clear debt to the landmark research of another NIMH psychologist, John B. Calhoun, who studied rat populations since 1946. Calhoun reported that rats in confined groups, even without drugs, became uncharacteristically aggressive. They'd erupt in rape, murder, cannibalism, and infanticide. A dormant male rat emerged in the behavioral sink, Calhoun's term for his aggressive rat cultures, subjugating other males into a tribe of cowering, enfeebled followers and organizing female rats into a harem of sex slaves. The strangest group to emerge was the probers, hypersexualized male rats that stalked and raped both male and females, and often cannibalized their young. Viewer discretion. The probers would commit frenzied and berserk attacks against rat families sleeping in their burrows, leaving the remains of half-eaten victims. Again, no drugs were involved here. The probers emerged simply as a result of their confinement. They deferred only to the dormant male rats, fleeing if he caught sight of them. Calhoun's study was a watershed. In the mid-60s, amid growing concerns about population density, social scientists, politicians, and journalists cited him to explain the riots in America's overcrowded ghettos. His term, behavioral sink, defined as the outcome of any behavioral process that collects animals together in unusually great numbers, aggravating all forms of pathology that can be found within the group, entered the scientific lexicon almost right away. David Smith used it extensively in his writing and in interviews with me. Though Smith never mentioned Calhoun by name, his research was essentially a continuation. He sought to control the pathologies of rats, or was it mice, in crowded environments by aggravating them with amphetamines. He concluded that amphetamines were more toxic to rats in groups than rats alone. Their crowding essentially exacerbated the effects of the stimulant. And this conclusion, like so much in Smith's research, confused me. I didn't see how it could be objective and unbiased. According to Calhoun, the rat's violence wasn't intensified by confinement, but created by it. So what difference did it make if Smith shot them up with amphetamines? It seemed like the equivalent of studying drunk, inexperienced ice skaters to learn about alcohol intoxication. The novice skaters were going to fall down on the ice anyway, regardless of whether they had been drinking or not. Plus, the more interesting subtleties of Calhoun's research, the emergence of dominant males, a harem of subservient females, and an underclass of probers, all of which, it had to be said, sounded a lot like the family, had gone entirely unnoted in Smith's project. I wondered if amphetamines were, or with or without LSD, had increased the dominant male's grip on his followers. Given how eerily Smith's research prefigured the creation of the family under David's nose in the Haight during the summer of '67, I wondered if he had deliberately underreported it. I've never come close to proving that he did, but I haven't been able to explain the holes in it either. Why would he use LSD to induce suggestibility in rats before injecting them with amphetamines and making them berserk? Past a certain point, Smith had little interest in helping me sort it out. I was just talking about the parallels to what happened with the Manson family, I said, and when I tried to describe your research, I just kept getting hung up on dash. Well, then why don't you just forget about the research then? Just delete the whole thing from your book. It was important, I said. You're spending way too much of your time and my time on it. Take what you want and reject the rest. The psychedelic syndrome. Alexi. Leo babies. Wow. You like the way my face stretches all the way to the very far edges of your head. It's not neat. Seats taken. You share a birthday with Sam Elliott? Whose birthday is it? Whose birthday is it? Oh, Craig's, yours is on the 9th. Happy birthday. What day is it? What day is it? My phone's gonna die. Is there a charger in here? Crap. Well, let me see. 16%. Let me see. Oh no. I'm gonna just bear down and get it done. Crap. How is there not a charger in here? Look at how many cables there are. And there's not a charger in here. Gee whiz. Man. Well, all right. We'll just see how far we get. It'll just go black and I'll know when I stop. Dakota. Joe. That ain't even funny. Your thing, oh my God. Mr. Inappropriate. It moved. So, the psychedelic syndrome. When Roger Smith joined forces with the HAFMC to begin the ARP, he was picking up where David left off. But this time, the research involved people. This meant that both Smiths and Manson were often in the same place at the same time, with both Smiths having received funding from a federal institute later revealed to be a CIA front. It was in a certain sense coincidental, David said, of the arrangement. Roger was the head of the Speed Project, and Charlie came to the Haight and visited Roger. He didn't come to be a part of the Speed Research Project. It was just that Roger happened to be his parole officer. Details on the ARP and the pharmacological goings-on at the HAFMC, more generally, were hard to come by. The realms of record-keeping you'd expect from clinical experimentation simply weren't there. Stephen Piddle, a forensic psychologist who had worked with both Smiths at the HAFMC, volunteered a stunning bit of information that Roger and David had neglected to share with me. The only thing I remember about ARP was that it got burglarized one night and Roger lost all of his files, Piddle told me. Their disappearance had been jarring, in part because Roger was an unusually paranoid guy to begin with. He was especially skittish about Manson. After the murders, Roger refused to discuss him with anyone. Piddle assumed that Smith didn't want to be blamed for directing Manson to the Haight. He felt people were saying that he was the one who put the toxins into the environment. The HAFMC's original chief psychiatrist, Dr. Ernest Dernberg, remembered the theft of the ARP files too. As he recalled, they'd gone missing right after the announcement of Manson's arrest for the Haight-LaBianca murders. Kind of like a Minnesota daycare who got called out for not having any students, and then somebody broke in. And that was funny too, to see how like they sawed out a hole from the inside of the bathroom to say somebody broke in and stole all of their enrollment files. Imagine that. What are the odds? Anyway, right after the Haight-LaBianca murders were announced and that Roger understandably was pretty upset, Nothing else was taken from the HAFMC. Wouldn't you know it? Which led the staff to believe that the police or some federal agency might have removed the files. Or maybe Roger did. These were research papers, he reminded me. It didn't make any sense for someone to steal these things when they didn't inherently have any value to the average individual. It seemed to have a more nefarious purpose. The Smiths both denied that the theft ever happened. You're dealing with aging memories, David said. But Dernberg and Piddle, full-time doctors and credible sources, I thought, stood by their stories. They were absolutely stolen, Piddle said. Dernberg, perturbed by David's insinuation about his faculties, told me more that he remembered. It was a considerable amount of research. The premier amphetamine research conducted at the street level. It would have been very important to the clinic, and it all disappeared. Call David, ask Roger if he has the files or knows where they are. Both men said they had no idea. What have survived are the many issues of the Journal of Psychedelic Drugs, the HAFMC's in-house research organ, still active to this day. David Smith founded it in '67, and at various points, both he and Roger served on its editorial board. In the late '60s and early '70s, the journal printed a raft of articles by David and other clinicians about the long-term effects of LSD and amphetamines. One of these articles hoped to find out whether a dramatic drug-induced experience would have a lasting impact on an individual's personality. Another observed feelings of frustrated anger led people to want to try LSD. The soil from which the flower children arise, the author wrote, is filled with more anger and aggression, thorns and thistles, rather than passion and petunias. Under emotional pressure, acid could induce images and sensations of anger or hate magnified into nightmarish proportions. Dave Smith had studied these same phenomena, formulating an idea that he called the psychedelic syndrome, first articulated in 1967 or early '68. The gist was that acid, when taken by groups of like-minded people, led to a chronic LSD state that reinforced the interpretation of psychedelic reality. The more often the same group of friends dropped acid, the more they encouraged one another to adopt the worldview they had discovered together on LSD, thus producing dramatic psychological changes. Usually, the psychedelic syndrome was harmless, but regular LSD use could cause the emergence of a dramatic orientation to mysticism. And in people with pre-psychotic personalities, Smith wrote, LSD precipitated a long-term psychological disorder, usually a depressive reaction or a schizophrenic process. Had Smith seen this syndrome in the family? After Manson had been arrested for the murders, David wrote, how does he know all that about LSD when he's using it in his research while it's tainted with speed use? The ARP is the amphetamines branch of the HAFMC, or, that was the study going on at the HAFMC. Anyway, had Smith seen this syndrome in the family? After Manson had been arrested for the murders, David wrote, Charlie could probably be diagnosed as ambulatory schizophrenic. He said the same thing when I asked about Manson. I felt that he was schizo. Anyway, it was Roger Smith who had the better diagnosis and the earlier one, David maintained. Roger said that he knew from day one that Charlie was a psychopath. But Roger apparently never thought it was necessary to intervene, to send his parolee back to prison or to get him proper psychiatric care. Instead, he sent him to the Haight and watched him drop acid every day, accruing suggestible young followers as he went. Meanwhile, David was studying the exact psychological conditions that gave rise to the Manson family while he treated them at his clinic. Bugliosi had erased all of these facts from his history of the group. Roger Smith knew that the stereotypes of the addict had a lot of potency in the popular imagination. Casual drug users were regarded as inherently criminal, a tear in the fabric of society. The public's fear of such people was easily manipulated. In 1966, the year before Manson was released from prison, Smith published a criminology paper called The Status, Politics, and the Image of the Addict, examining the propaganda that had stigmatized Chinese, or Oriental, as he put it, opium smokers in San Francisco in the early 20th century. Citing police files and strategy manuals, Smith described an organized effort to cast opium addicts, who were by and large peaceful, as insidious deviants who posed a threat to society. To this end, some agents were assigned to pose as drug addicts and infiltrate the opium scene. Their objective was to characterize the addicts as a dangerous individual, likely to rob, grape, or plunder in his crazed state. And it worked. The once invisible opium users in San Francisco's Chinese ghettos were, by 1925, depicted in the media as crazed dope fiends. The shift in public perception allowed the police to crack down on the Chinese population. Oh, reefer madness for the Chinese. Deporting or institutionalizing the undesirables. Smith neither valorized or condemned these efforts, but he noted that they were effective. The Orientals, he wrote, were viewed as a threat to the existing structure of life in this country. Tainting their image meant that they could be differentiated and degraded to the satisfaction of society. It's not hard to see how such research could be applied to Haight-Ashbury hippies in the late 60s. Most Americans frowned on acid as they frowned on all drugs, but it took Charles Manson to give LSD new and fearsome dimensions. See, they pinned LSD on it, but the variable is amphetamines. Hi, Kimmel, hooray! I'm happy to see you. Abigail, it's your birthday. Happy birthday from all of us to you. Do you remember that song? What is that from? Da-na-na-na-na-na. Anyway, what was that from? I keep thinking like Saved by the Bell, but it's old-timey. Anyway, maybe it was a restaurant. My bad. Yeah. I love it. I love you guys. I'm so glad everybody's here. Yeah. And then all the tech bros started using acid in Silicon Valley. And they were like, it's a miracle. It's a wonder drug. It really, I mean, it really is. It's super medicinal. You can help, you know. What do we take our dogs to, what do you call it? A behavioralist? Dog training. You know what I'm saying. Sometimes we need it too. Sometimes we need to defragment the hard drive. That's what it felt like when I tried it. I tried it first. I was microdosing. I was trying to heal a brain injury on my own. And I didn't like the acid, the LSD, it was too speedy for me. So I did the microdosing of mushrooms, and it was quite helpful, profoundly helpful. Ohio. No, LSD doesn't create holes in the brain. That's MDMA. It makes people's brains spongy. There was a girl, it was like in the early aughts, back when raves were all the rage, and she had declined cognitively and got a brain scan, and it was like Swiss cheese. You stop. Did they use it in mental asylums? I feel like they did, but they used it as a way to wipe people's personality. That was the MK Ultra. It's verbatim how you see it. What? Mozzarella. It's like it's bubbly. I wonder what it is. It's fermented, maybe a little. I don't know how they do the bubbles in Swiss cheese or what creates the bubbles, but it is kind of a stinky cheese. It's a foot cheese. LSD can mess up brain connectivity. Yeah. But it also rewires the brain. And I feel like it can be messed up in the sense, but like that's essentially what it's doing. Ketamine too. Yep. I had a friend with chronic depression, and he did like a 90-day ketamine thing where he microdosed it, and he's like, the sky is finally blue. He said it was a wild feeling. That's how I feel with methylene blue, though. That was the only thing that eliminated my depression, and I definitely struggled with it. But I've been on methylene blue for almost, well, I guess a year and a half or so, or I don't know. Handsome, huge tiger. What is the price of your cheese? I mean, market pricing. Plant spirit teachers, yes. You need a medicine person for plant spirit teachers. It's good to always have a guide. It's good to consider set and setting. Don't go out and party if you're going to try these things. Just be at home and be cozy and comfy and take care of yourself, your future self and your present self in those moments, and have somebody you trust with you. But it's not for everybody to do these things, so don't go diving in. You had a friend who used ketamine and his bipolar symptoms are vastly improved. It's amazing. It's amazing what we can do. And it's amazing, like I said yesterday, I'll say it again, the mushrooms that can kill you aren't illegal, but the mushrooms that can heal your brains are. The mushrooms that can, but with MDMA or ecstasy, they did studies back in the day, and there was a couple, and one of them was dying of cancer, and he was stage 4, like days away, and so the therapist suggested trying MDMA as a couple, and he was able to drop his fear of dying. He was able to connect with his wife in a profoundly beautiful way, and she was able to say all the things she couldn't say, and even articulate things that she couldn't fathom articulating before without the assistance of this substance and their guide. And it's just beautiful. Like, these things have been kept from us, except alcohol, the most dangerous drug, or the one drug that makes people the most dangerous, is legal as can be, and they took nicotine, which I believe tobacco was the grandfather plant teacher. And they just ruined it with chemicals, the chemicals that make us ill. All right. To this end, some agents, okay. All right. Smith described, nope, I'm backing up. In 1966, the year before Manson was released from prison, Smith published a criminology paper called Status, Politics, and the Image of the Addict. Did I already read that? Examining the propaganda that had stigmatized the Chinese or Oriental. Yes, I did read that. All right. We're skipping down to this end. Citing police. This is where I stopped. So, citing police files and strategy manuals, Smith described an organized effort to cast opium addicts, who were by and large peaceful, as insidious. I did read this. Agents posed as drug addicts, infiltrated the opium scene, blah, blah, blah. The shift in public perception allowed the police to crack down on the Chinese populations, deporting or institutionalizing the undesirables. Did I already read all the way down? I did. It's not hard to see how research could be applied to Haight-Ashbury hippies in the late 60s. Most Americans frowned on acid as they frowned on all drugs, but it took Charles Manson. Oh, yeah. Shit. Sorry, my guys. But just because the clinic had free in its name didn't mean that it had no cost. All right, the HAFMC's goal, free healthcare for everyone, was an unimpeachable part of the hippie ethic. And there could be no doubting that Dave Smith and his volunteer doctors had improved the community. But just because the clinic had free in its name didn't mean that it had no cost. The place served as a gateway between the hippie world and the straight world, affording doctors a closer look at the hierarchies and nuances of the counterculture. In exchange for their free health care, patients were held up to the light and scrutinized by eager researchers, David Smith chief among them. Emmett Grogan, the founder of the Diggers, was one of a few observers who saw something amiss behind Smith's idealism. I hope we find out what the Diggers are here soon. Immediately. The Diggers were an anarchist group known for providing food, housing, and medical aid to runaways in the Bay Area. Smith liked them, and he worked with them at a free infirmary based out of their happening house. It inspired his own clinic. But as Grogan wrote in his 1972 memoir, Ringo Levio, the admiration wasn't mutual, at least not for long. Smith soon began his own self-aggrandizement. He appeared more concerned with the pharmacology of the situation than with treating the ailing people who came to him for help. Grogan noticed that he kept detailed records about drugs and their abuse. These he used to secure funding for the HAFMC, which he opened only 6 weeks after he joined the Diggers operation. Grogan saw through the HAFMC's mission statement right away. Just because no one was made to pay a fee when they went there didn't make it a free clinic. Right, if anything is free, you are the product. Same with social media. On the contrary, the patients were treated as research subjects, and the facility was used to support whatever medical innovations were new and appropriate to the agency. Of course, one of these patients was Manson, who became one of Dave Smith's research subjects as well. He was such a special case that Smith tracked him far beyond the walls of the HAFMC, sending his top researchers all the way down to Los Angeles, where Manson and his ranks of followers had set up shop on the time-worn western sets of the Spahn Ranch. The group marriage commune. You might remember the name Alan Rose. It was Rose who dropped everything and went to Mendocino County in '68 when several of Manson's followers wound up in jail there. That trip was only a prelude of his deeper involvement with the family, which saw him in bed with the group to study their sexual dynamics or just to get laid, depending on whom you ask. Rose was a friend of Roger Smith. He'd helped set up the ARP, but he was even closer to David Smith. Or David, yeah, it said David, right? Who told me Al was like my disciple and I was like his father. A former rabbinical student, Rose had dropped out of college in Ohio to move to the Haight in '66 when he was 21. He became the HAFMC's head administrator and research assistant at various times to both Smiths. Rose and David went on to co-author 3 studies of the Haight drug culture in the Journal of Psychedelic Drugs. Like the Smiths, Rose had an intuitive grasp of the population and a clinician's knowledge of the drugs they were taking, even though he had no formal medical training. While reserved and socially awkward by many accounts, Rose enjoyed the Haight, especially its sexual openness. He felt inexperienced in that regard, and he hoped he could change that when Roger introduced him to Manson and his girls, who were coming by the clinic with increasing frequency. Rose was enamored. He decided, along with David, that they'd make for good research subjects. But already there was a question of his impartiality. The legend around the HAFMC was that the girls had seduced Rose, probably on Manson's orders. So when in June 1968, Manson hand-selected a number of his group to accompany him to Los Angeles, Rose may have feared that the year-long party was drawing to a close. He invited the remaining women to move into his Haight-Ashbury home, where he could tend to their needs until Manson summoned them. It was then that some of the girls headed to Ukiah for their ill-fated recruitment effort. When they landed in jail, Rose jumped at the chance to rescue them. As David Smith described the episode in Love Needs Care, Rose outdid himself, visiting the girls daily and fetching candy and cigarettes for them. Mary Brunner, the mother of Manson's newborn son, was still lactating. The other girls made a habit of going naked and sucking milk from her breasts. This rattled the jail staff, but Rose vouched for the girls. Outside the jail, he kept busy by consulting with lawyers in courtroom strategy and preparing his testimony. Oh my God, that's making me gag. I can't think of anything else right now. So I'll start that sentence over. Outside the jail, he kept busy by consulting with lawyers on courtroom strategy and preparing his testimony as a character witness. All the while, he was living on money funneled to him by David. When the case was resolved, the girls made tracks for the Spawn Ranch, not wanting to keep Manson waiting. By now, it seemed Rose couldn't bear to part with them. He elected to go too, and then he stayed with them for 4 months. Was this a business trip or a vacation? It's up for debate just how totally Rose succumbed to the family's power. Judging from the published accounts of his time with them, he was more an enabler than a blind devotee. Somewhat opaquely, David wrote that Rose was both sympathetic cousin and a sociologically oriented participant observer in the strange communal phenomenon. Roger Smith had used the term participant observer too for his ARP. Am I saying AARP every time? That's embarrassing. Free food to take at the late show with the backup dealers dressed as syringes. Yes, I remember that, Dakota. Ugh, how did people not immediately clock that as freaking propaganda? Hang on a second. If my Alp is in too long, I forget, and then I take it out and I look like a fiend. This isn't like chain smoking. I just had a minty pouch. I want a nicotine pouch, not just a minty pouch. Alps. Love me some Alps. I wish they would sponsor me, but I'm not. I don't have enough clout. Why? Why? What did Talons say? The good news. Carbon dioxide gas bubbles cause the holes in Swiss cheese, right? Is that from fermenting? So our respiratory output. I wonder what physiological process MDMA acts upon to cause the adverse output of CO2. Interesting. Oh. Huh. Interesting. We all, like, they call it, they say it looked like her brain, it looked like she was in advanced stages of Alzheimer's. All right. Heck yeah, girl. 10%, my battery went down 6% in how many minutes? Let me see. In 10 minutes. Oh my gosh. Should I just go up and get a charger? You guys come with me. I'll need the phone light. All right, pause. We're pausing. We're gonna go on a little field trip. So I want to finish this chapter. It's a long one too, so. Oh yeah. Look at, there's the nuisance set list. Anyway. Cool, right? Shh. We're taking a break. Don't fall asleep. Pardon. Sorry, I'm still here. I just can't see anything. Thank you for being patient. Hooray. Huzzah. Hooray. Okay. We're back. Everybody's asleep. Oh, tell me there's a power strip. Oh my God, in this mess. I may have to move. You've got to be kidding me. Oh, there it is. Oh, it's full. Power strip. Outlet. There's an outlet. This will probably be a long one. I think I might end up having to set up on the floor here. So hang tight. Oh. Hang tight. How am I supposed to have it plugged in? I can't use my freaking... All right. We're doing it live. This is cool. Sorry, YouTube. Nuisance. Ghost of the Mississippi. I almost said another band. That isn't it. Let's see if this works. It might. It might. Nope, it won't. Shoot. You're listening while half dreaming and awakened. Thoughtful relaxation. Great, Vincent. I love that. I love that because I have to fall asleep listening to people, and it's generally the droning on true crime stuff. So I'm like, what do I do? I guess I'm gonna just hold it and read until I can unplug it. All right. This is bogus. Let me see. Would this work? Maybe like that. Ooh, I might have found a loophole. Yes. Here we go. Now we got it. All right, we were talking about Rose. It was then some of the girls headed to Ukiah. Oh, yes. Drinking milk. Ugh, outside the jail. When the case was resolved, the girls made tracks for the Spawn Ranch, not wanting to keep Manson waiting. By now, it seemed Rose couldn't bear to be apart from them. He elected to go too, and then he stayed with them for 4 months. Oh, was it a business trip or vacation? I read it. So Roger Smith had used the term participant observer too. So David provided varying and sometimes contradictory accounts of Rose's role in the family, and he lost his temper when I tried to set the record straight. The first time we spoke, he admitted that Al had become enraptured with their philosophy, and he traveled with them. Rose dropped acid with the family, Smith said, and then 6 of the girls just fucked his brains out, and he said, God. He borrowed some money. Nope. He borrowed some money from me, and he didn't pay it back. And it turned out he gave it to Charlie. So it was like very weird. And that was a quote. Other sources also remembered Rose having some kind of ecstatic sexual encounter with the family. But at some point, the appeal of the group faded for him, and he left. He came back, Smith said. I can't really say he got kicked out. He just said he was no longer part of it. Love a good loophole. Perfect. Yes, it's literally like the bottom of the stand has a hollow, and the charger fits, and my little stand. Hi, Ruben. The good news. You throw on Tim. I love Tim Dillon, but when he starts going, he always wakes me up, but I get startled. Like, wait, he's real good. The Tucker. Did you see Tucker's like Save America post or video? That was just beautiful. And if he friggin' runs for anyway, So I don't know how y'all feel about that, but it was very nice. It was a breath of fresh air. Okay, so he wasn't kicked out. He was just no longer a part of it. And yet, when I revisited the matter with Smith a few years later, he said, I don't know if Al went to Spawn Ranch. When I reminded him what he said, that he had said otherwise, he made a grudging concession. He was with them for 4 weeks max. So I tracked down Rose himself, who told me in a phone call that he was at the ranch for probably 3 or 4 months. Rose was shocked that I wanted to talk to him. Only one other journalist had been in touch, and I found him nonchalant about his time with the family. More than either of the Smiths, he came across as mild, somewhat naive, and unassuming. His memories of the late 60s had their edges smoothed like stones in the sea. Of course, he remembered the girls. They had a level of self-confidence and dynamism that was pretty amazing, he said. They could walk into stores and get checks cashed without IDs, okay? And he remembered the power that Manson exuded, recalling a man whose raw charisma was by then tainted with egotism, and racism. Still, he obeyed Manson, sincerely feeling that his destiny was going with Charlie and the girls. He added, we were all pretty impressionable, very idealistic. Charlie convinced me I didn't need glasses. I stopped wearing them. He'd have me drive the bus up and down LA freeway, and I had to really strain. When he had finally made What had finally made him leave the Spawn Ranch was an incident in which Manson picked up a prostitute from the freeway and paraded her in front of his followers, saying that he wouldn't have sex with her because she wouldn't give him head. And I just saw that as such an abuse of power that he had. It was late autumn in 1968 when Rose returned to the Haight. He moved in with Roger and his wife, Carol, in Tiburon and assisted in writing up 2 studies. The first was Roger's ARP dissertation. The second was called The Group Marriage Commune, a Case Study, co-authored with David Smith, the first ever scholarly study on the Manson family. David and Rose believed they had a major research paper on their hands, bolstered by Rose's firsthand observations of the family. The first published remarks about their study appeared 6 weeks after the family was charged with the murders. In a January 1970 interview Smith gave to the Berkeley Barb and Alt Weekly, the front page story was headlined, MD on Manson's sex life. Psychologist who lived with the Manson family tells about commune. Smith discussed Rose's 4 months on the ranch, but he never indicated that his co-researcher had been a follower of Manson. Intentionally or not, Smith gave the impression that Rose's time with the family was part of a planned study. In fact, they decided to write about the family only after Rose left the commune, a point they'd finesse later. And even though Rose was the psychologist referred to in the headline, he wasn't, of course, a real psychologist. Smith didn't let him do any of the talking. Instead, the reporter quoted portions of their scholarly paper, noting that Smith had pulled that article from the presses as soon as he learned that its subjects had been accused of mass murder. The paper was eventually published in the Journal of Psychedelic Drugs in September of 1970. It distanced the HAFMC from Rose's involvement with the family, and it never identified Manson by his last name, leaving the reader to make the connection. Participation in the commune at the time of Rose's involvement, read the introduction, was not associated with academic observation, and only after leaving the communal setting was thought given to the description. To exculpate the author, how do you say that word? To exculpate, whatever, the authors of any responsibility for the murders. It fudged the facts about Charlie, claiming that during our observation, he expressed a philosophy of nonviolence. LSD-induced psychedelic philosophy was not a major motivational force. Smith further downplayed the family's connection to the HAFMC by claiming that they only spent 3 months living in the Haight, during which their primary residence was a bus. In fact, the family lived in the Haight for more than a year, 2 blocks from the HAFMC, and after Manson took some followers to Los Angeles, the others moved into Rose's home. Oh, I was stuck. Spicy part, yes. Love from Boston. Hello, Keith. Welcome. Good to see y'all. So, any new, joiners, we're reading Chaos about Charles Manson, CIA, and the 60s. Okay, Smith further downplayed. Nope. Rose's home. That's why I got stuck. So the paper asked why these young girls were so attracted and captivated by a disturbed mystic such as Charlie. That was a great question. Past a certain point, it seemed Rose and Smith had no intention of answering it. Their paper detailed Manson's abusive, controlling methods, especially his sexual tactics, but it steered clear of the true area of expertise, LSD. Most egregiously, the paper was never updated to mention the Haight-LaBianca murders, even though it was published a full year later. The defining event of the commune that Rose had infiltrated was nowhere to be found. Extricated. Vincent Bugliosi didn't have much use for David or Roger Smith, and he had no use at all for Alan Rose. He didn't interview any of them for Helter Skelter. The book's one quote from Roger, quote, "There are a lot of Charlies running around, believe me," was lifted from a short piece in Life magazine and framed to make it look as if Bugliosi had actually spoken to him. The same was true of David Bugliosi. Oh, the same was true of David, period. Bugliosi used him to shrug off the implications that drugs enabled the family, quoting his assertion that sex, not drugs, was the common denominator. That quote is also pulled misleadingly from Life. David had written about Manson in the same issue. Given the realm of Smith's research, I can't see how he really believed it. Other than that, the Smiths are absent from the story that might never have unfolded without them. A book is one thing. Bugliosi had dramatic license. Maybe he just didn't think he could do justice to Manson's messy year in Haight-Ashbury. The trial was different. There, Bugliosi had to convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt. Because that's what we do in America. Beyond a reasonable doubt. And just saying there's overwhelming evidence doesn't make it so. There is in Candace. Anyway, Candace is the only one bringing any to the table. A book is one thing, the court was the other. Where is that? The trial was different. There, Bugliosi had to convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt that Manson had enough control over his followers to get them to kill for him. He got former family members to testify in exchange for lighter sentences or dropped charges. They provided vivid illustrations of Manson's domination, but he never called Roger or David Smith, two authorities who'd have almost daily exposure to Manson as he formed the group. Bugliosi's obsession with convicting Manson of conspiracy is the drama that drives Helter Skelter forward. To get Manson's guilty verdict, he had to demonstrate that Manson had ordered to murder. To get Manson's guilty verdict, he had to demonstrate that Manson had ordered the murders and had enough control over the killers that they would do his bidding without question. And he was desperate to do this. He wanted witnesses who could say that Manson ordered or instructed anyone to do anything. He told his subordinates he had to prove domination. Anyway, and so I was just, singing Pantera in my head. Thank you. I'm so glad you think so. And I'm over here stumbling. Oh yeah, domination. So Roger Smith and David Smith's life essays, the same ones Bugliosi quoted in Helter Skelter, came out a month before Bugliosi issued those marching orders to LAPD detectives. Within weeks, the Berkeley Barb and Los Angeles Free Press ran their front page stories featuring David Smith's discussion of Manson's indoctrination techniques, his process of reorienting his new recruits, and his methods of disciplining family members. Bugliosi told the jury he'd proved that Manson was the dictatorial leader of the family. He was still calling witnesses to the stand when David Smith and Alan Rose's research paper came out, featuring such lines as, "Manson served as absolute ruler." Yet the Smiths and Alan Rose told me that Bugliosi never got in touch with them, nor did anyone else from the Los Angeles DA's office or the LAPD. Despite their extensive knowledge of the family, the researchers never felt it was their duty to tell authorities what they knew. If anything, David Smith feared testifying. "I remember not wanting to be involved in that trial," he said. "I felt that it could compromise our clinic." Dr. Dernberg, the psychiatric director of the HAFMC, when the family went there, followed the trial with mounting gloom as he realized that the whole San Francisco chapter of Manson's life was never going to come out. He told me it was as if Manson's stay up here had been extricated from the whole mass of data. I couldn't wrap my head around this. Why did Bugliosi ignore the most powerful prosecution evidence available? Eyewitness testimony of Manson's control from his parole officer, a laureled medicinal researcher, and his assistant, who'd lived with the group. Each could have taken the witness stand independently, untainted by the suggestion of a plea arrangement or some type of deal. I knew I'd have to ask Bugliosi about this eventually, but by that point I didn't trust him, and I wanted to box him in as much as I could. So I called on Stephen Kay, his co-prosecutor, and showed him all the evidence of the Smiths' relationship with the family. I was on good terms with Kay, and I felt I could rely on him to be straight with me. At his office, I laid out the 2 life essays, which I knew Bugliosi had seen, plus press accounts of the Smiths and the HAFMC research papers. Kay read through them diligently. "I've never seen these before," he said, his mouth open. I asked if there was any way that Bugliosi had missed this stuff. "Absolutely not," Kay said. "Vince read all the newspapers, every paper that came out. He subscribed to every paper." "I know everything we had in the files," Kay went on, "because we had a big file cabinet. I'd seen through all that." He was positive they didn't have the Smiths' papers and articles there. If Bugliosi knew about them, he wasn't keeping them in the regular file. As far as Kay would recall, Bugliosi had never discussed the Smiths and Alan Rose, never entertained the idea of putting them on the stand. But Kay couldn't understand why. "If we had an independent person like that," he told me, that's much better than calling a member of the Manson family. They would have been dynamite witnesses for us." Although the Smiths never appeared in the courtroom, the link between their research and Bugliosi's reasoning that continues to perplex me. In the first phase of the trial, the prosecutor persuaded the jury that Manson had controlled his followers' every thought and action, full stop. In the trial's death penalty phase, he had to refine the argument somewhat because the defendants could be sentenced to death only if they were acting under their own free will. Bugliosi claimed that regardless of their brainwashing, each of them had independent capacity to murder. As Bugliosi explained it to me in our first meeting in 1999, Manson had somehow learned that a select few of his followers were willing and able to kill. Something in the deepest resources of their soul enabled them to do something that you and I cannot do, he said to me that day. There was something independent of Charles Manson that was coursing through them. These people not only killed for him, but they did it with gusto, with relish. 169 stab wounds, some of them post-mortem. What does that show? I think it's circumstantial evidence that some people have much more homicidal tendencies than other. It's those tendencies that recall David Smith's research. In a 1969 issue of the Journal of Psychedelic Drugs, my feet are now going numb. So that's fun. And I lost it. Where am I? Oh. Both Roger and Smith and Alan Rose had been removed as authors, contradicting his later claim in Love Needs Care. Dave Smith wrote that he disagreed with the consensus that personality was the prime factor in differentiating between psychotic and non-psychotic reactions. Is anybody else picturing Dave Smith when I say his name? That's what this guy looks like to me. R. Dave Smith. But this guy, he's probably real old and wrinkly if he is still alive. Okay, arguing instead that in the drug subculture of the Haight-Ashbury, the prime determinants of psychotic and non-psychotic reactions were immediate drug environment and experience of the user. More significant than the contradictions, I felt, was the article's obscurity. When the HAFMC republished bound editions of all the journals 5 years later, acute amphetamine toxicity wasn't included in the collection. All the annotations referred to it in other journal articles had been removed too, just as Manson's time in the Haight was extricated from the record at trial. The study by the two Smiths and Alan Rose, a study into the origins of the same psychological tendencies found in members of the Manson family, had disappeared. XX. Abigail, look at you all good and remembering stuff. Thank you. Was it? I've never heard that. It was an offshoot? Or was transcendental meditation an, I guess that's kind of an ancient practice, maybe. That's interesting, Selena. All right. We're almost done. Coda is coming up. What it is. Oh, it's Coda is right now. 6 hours with Roger Smith. Even now, more than a decade later, I get excited when I look at the host of documents I showed to Kay that day. Flipping through them, I remembered how I felt when I was reporting on Manson's lost year in San Francisco. I thought I'd found the angle that would set my story apart from the reams of others, the beginnings of working theory about what really motivated the Haight-LaBianca murders. True, it had come late to work for Premiere, but it could be the linchpin for my book. I pinned a lot of my hopes on one last interview, a sit-down with Roger Smith. It was set for late December 2001. My deal with Premiere had been off for a year and I was living off savings, but they were dwindling. If I wanted to earn more money, I'd have to finish my book proposal and sell it to a publisher. When I spoke to Smith, I knew I had to come away with something so solid that I could finish my reporting, and I sincerely believed that I could. To me, it was obvious that Smith had covered up something, and the evidence was so abundant, at this point, I'd have no trouble confronting him about it, even if our exchange got contentious. I would show him documents he hadn't seen in more than 3 decades. I would press him on his connections to the HAFMC, to Manson, to David Smith, and more. I would ask him why he'd never sent Manson back to prison and why he'd gone along with the bizarre plot to send him to Mexico. Needless to say, it didn't work out like that. After the Manson murders, Smith spent his career behind well-fortified walls of numerous federal penitentiaries. When he ran specialized units studying or treating sex offenders and drug addicts, it was a path that afforded him plenty of privacy. Over the years, I'd lived on a yacht off the coast of Hawaii in rural Bend. He, not I. Tim didn't. Roger Smith did. He lived in rural Bend, Oregon, and in a farmhouse more than a century old, surrounded by cornfields in this is going to get me in trouble, YPSI, Michigan, outside of Ann Arbor. Smith had agreed to the interview without a moment's hesitation, though I'd called him out of the blue. He was preparing to retire after a decade as director of the Bureau of Mental Forensics for the Michigan State Penitentiary System, and he claimed that none of the many people from his circle I'd interviewed by then had said anything to him about me. On the phone, he told me that he'd been reticent about Manson over the years for fear that the affiliation would tarnish his career. I'm close to retirement now, he said, so maybe it's okay to talk. Oh, I'm way out of the frame. Oh, yeah. I thought I could just move my phone. There we go. Now we could talk. All right, our interview began in his office at the prison. It ended at his beautifully restored farmhouse, nearly 6 hours, a pizza, and several bottles of wine later. It was late December and snow was falling. Outside, the fields were blanketed in white and the houses, his included, twinkled with Christmas lights. Smith lived with his second wife, Carmen, who sat with us in the living room for almost the entirety of the interview. A fire roasted in the hearth. Soft rock emanated from a station he found on satellite TV. The couple was unfailingly courteous, and I found Smith a patient listener. Only a few times did he betray any frustration with my lines of questioning, even as I forced him to examine papers he hadn't seen in 35 years. But the fact was this: he gave me nothing. On the most important question about his relationship to Manson, he pleaded ignorance or claimed he had no memory at all. I've never been able to understand how he ended up under your supervision in San Francisco if he was paroled in LA, I said. I really don't either, Smith said. He posited that parole protocols were more relaxed back in the 60s and that the officials just didn't care if Manson took himself to another city. Different time then, I think. Smith had a memory of interviewing Manson as part of his pre-release from prison, a routine process that couldn't have involved him, at least not officially, if Manson was released in Los Angeles. Well, I guess I didn't, he replied. Then I told him that I don't even remember that he was released. No, he replied when I told him that I don't even remember that he was released out of LA. But I thought I'd have him dead to rights on the question of Manson's arrest during his parole supervision. His arrests, plural. I had him look over the letter he'd sent to Washington, D.C., asking for permission for Manson to travel to Mexico. He was actually in jail then in Ukiah, I told Smith. Really? I was never notified. This is a mystery to me. I should have been notified. By Manson, or at least by the people who arrested him, I asked. By the people who arrested him, Smith said. There would be some federal record of his arrests, convictions, incarcerations, and his criminal justice status. Would his parole have been violated for that arrest? Oh, absolutely. I didn't know it at the time, but Smith was right, in a way. There were 2 federal documents, Manson's FBI rap sheet and his Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation record, listing his July 31st, 1967 conviction, proving that the government had been notified. The first of those documents dated to the time of I usually have the page already. Oh my God, that was page 333, by the way. Let's just look at that for a second. Anyway, and now we're moving on. Smith's supervision. The first of those documents dated to the time of Smith's supervision, so he would have been notified too. The probation office receives such papers as a matter of course, but he was saying it wasn't. For good measure, I checked with another federal parole officer who worked in the Bay Area in that era. He confirmed that the Justice Department would have automatically notified Smith of Manson's conviction. Even back then, he said, federal guys didn't mess up. Whenever I reread my interview transcripts, I wince at moments like this. I prepared diligently for these conversations, especially in cases where I thought the right questions could bring major new revelations. Reliving marathon interviews like this, I sometimes kick myself even for having had to stop the conversation to go to the bathroom. Maybe if I hadn't taken a break, things would have gone differently. Even now, I wonder what could have happened. If he'd held off in confronting Smith until I marshaled every possible resource, in 2001, for example, I hadn't yet found the glowing recommendation he'd provided for Susan Atkins, effectively winning her probation a year before the murders. Excellent. Oh, the charging is starting and stopping, but we're about halfway. He was a Manchurian candidate. I'm glad you hear me. All right. He absolutely was. He was that dominant rat. Where am I? Where was it? Oh, yeah. Even now, I wonder what could have happened if I'd held off on confronting Smith until I'd marshaled every possible resource. In 2001, for example, I hadn't yet found the glowing recommendation that he provided of Susan Atkins, effectively winning her probation a year before the murders. If I'd had that, I could have challenged a bunch of the assertions he made about Atkins that night. He called her a hard lady, and he hoped she never got out of prison. Quote, she was scary, she was aggressive, I thought she was sort of Charlie's operative. Quite an about-face from the man who claimed in 1968 that Atkins would comply willingly with any probationary conditions aimed at her rehabilitation. I pointed out that Manson had apparently continued to invoke Smith's name after the parole relationship dissolved. Manson and the girls continued visiting him at his office, at the HAFMC, and even at his home. I told Smith, I think he was still trying to pass you off as his PO. But all he had to say on this subject was, oh, really? When Smith said he'd never been asked to testify at the trial, despite having served as an expert witness in lots and lots of trials, I told him and his wife how much that baffled me. They seemed perplexed, too. I asked, was there something going on behind the scenes that your testifying would have exposed? A big picture they didn't want exposed? Maybe like in LA, where they kept releasing him for offenses without charging him when they had evidence against him. For the first time, Smith lost his temper. Okay, you're operating from the theory that he was tied in. Something else was going on. Tom, I can't help you. I don't know. His face reddened and he shouted, I really don't know. Because you're part of his gestating phase in San Francisco, I thought maybe you'd have an indication. Yeah, I saw his talent. I saw his bullshit. He was very glib, Smith said. I had known for a long time how powerful his effect was on people. His particular brand of psychobabble was as persuasive as anybody on the street. He reminded me that San Francisco in the late 60s may have been another country. So different were its customs and mores. I was sympathetic to a point, but by then I'd spoken to so many people about this period that it felt at once totally near and completely alien. So many of my sources, even the most reliable, had trouble explaining their feelings and motivations, not just because so much time had passed, but because some schism stood between them and the past. It was irreparable. Wherever the 60s had come from, they were gone, even in memory. As we refilled our wine glasses, Smith conjured the scene. That was almost foreshadowing. After so much time. Anyway, never mind. As we refilled our wine glasses, Smith conjured the scene. It was a time when birth control pills first became widely available. You will find this absolutely stupid. Women used to walk around and pull up their sweaters to show that they didn't have bras on, and they would actually seek you out to have sex. Unheard of, he continued. Then comes the whole drug thing. Then comes Haight-Ashbury. The whole Bay Area was one of the most electric places you could possibly be. It was like a magnet. Manson, he said, had arrived at the tail end of this innocence. When Smith traded his parole job for the ARP, he remembered the hate already yielding to speed, the beginning of one of the most incredibly destructive patterns in drug use I'd ever seen. The first 6 months I was there were 30 murders within like a six-block radius of the office we had. It was middle class, totally naive kids. It was the worst maudlin, stupid theater. It was the worst maudlin, stupid theater that you'd ever seen. Maudlin. Can somebody look up what maudlin means? M-A-U-D-L-I-N? Let me see that in the chat. So in a scene like that, the Charles Mansons of the world were a dime a dozen. The hate was so flooded with weirdos, seekers, addicts, and guru figures that no one batted an eye at him. If anything, Smith said, Manson was a little more respectable than many of them, insofar as he eschewed speed and asked his followers to do the same. He was very odd. He was a hippie, it was clear. He was very manipulative, but was he highly dangerous? Didn't see it. I did let him travel, and there were some checks and balances. Basically, when he was in the Bay Area, he was in my office every week. I saw him a lot. Not only in the office, he came in with his girls after a while, and I think that became kind of an annoyance to the office. I made a mental note of that comment. It seemed to confirm that Manson was visiting Smith for parole meetings at the HAFMC. Later, he backed away from it. My association with the clinic really was pretty intermittent, he said. It wasn't until after I left federal probation that I came down there. The chronology confuses me. Oops. The chronology confuses me, I said. The people at the clinic all thought he was coming in for probation. No. I had left probation. So he was just coming in to say hello? First of all, he didn't come in that often, Smith said. I never saw him in any official way, and I also never invited him. There could be nothing untoward about Manson's appearances at the HAFMC, he implied, because a conspiracy takes careful planning, and no one there had the capacity to plan anything. Nothing happened according to the schedule in the Haight-Ashbury. You had people walking around jacked up on 2 grams of speed, tampered out with heroin, people carrying guns and tweaking on acid, and it was absolutely crazy. Actually, Charlie and his girls were the sanest people around in some ways. That claim shouldn't have surprised me either. Manson had endeared himself to Smith. They were close enough that Smith felt comfortable taking care of Manson's baby. Maudlin is an adjective that means being overly, foolishly, or weakly emotional and sentimental. Maudlin. It often describes tearful self-pity, frequently brought on or made worse by drinking alcohol. Oh, the light over there is changing color. I just noticed. Thank you, Craig. Being overly foolish. Oh, thank you, Dakota. Awesome, you guys. Wow. His baby. Okay, he looked after the child for a couple of months, I think. I knew it was long enough to have that baby circumcised, which I think really pissed him off. When we'd finished our pizza and made our way through most of the final bottle of wine, I steered Smith back towards the subject of Manson's psychology. Who did it piss off? Did it piss off Charlie? That dude circumcised his baby? That would have pissed me off. Anyway. To acknowledge Manson's... Nope, okay. I've still felt he was trying to have it both ways. To acknowledge Manson's anger and instability, and sometimes in the same breath to downplay the eccentricities of a man who'd started a cult as Smith watched on. There was this unquestionable loyalty to Charlie where they were in San Francisco, but there was almost a good-natured quality to it, Smith told me. There was still the ability to joke with him and push him. In his mind, the move to Spawn Ranch was fatal, in that it took the family out of society. They were isolated. They were doing acid every day, and they were essentially without any reality checks at all. There's a time when everything flips, and I don't know when that was, but it sure as hell wasn't when he was in San Francisco. Explaining why he refused to talk about Manson for more than 25 years, he said, "There's a lot of people who become overnight experts on Manson, particularly back then. Even now, I'm prepared to tell you to get the fuck out of here at some point. You understand what I'm doing here and what's important, which is me. The thing is, Tom, as I look back on the time, I don't know what else I could have done. I felt real sadness about it. I don't feel any culpability." That about summed it up. Soon I thanked Smith and his wife for their generosity and got to my feet. We all had some wine, and there was a warmth, if not a trust, in the rustic old farmhouse. I remembered suddenly that it was almost Christmas. They had led me to the back door, both of them waving as they saw me out. Flakes of snow still falling from the night sky. In my rental car, I took the old highway back past the prison that Smith worked at. Apparently, he'd personally planned their new $10 million mental health care facility. The thought of it made me feel small. He'd been more than accommodating, hadn't he? And he'd taken a serious look at the papers I'd found and given serious consideration to my questions. On the face of it, I had no reason to be dissatisfied, having just gotten hours of tape from one of the most reclusive officials connected to Charles Manson. And yet, as I dwelled on it, the interview felt strange and inconclusive. The closer I got to my motel, the sadder I got. I wasn't finished with the story or even close to finished. I'd gone to Michigan expecting to shock Roger Smith with incontrovertible evidence of everything he'd overlooked. He had reacted basically with 6 hours of shrugging and some free wine and pizza. Soon enough, I'd transcribed the interview and started to work away at the little inconsistencies and contradictions in Smith's account. But at the moment, I was crestfallen. Even supposing I could find something to push back on, was I right about any of it? Or had Smith entertained 6 hours of questioning from someone peddling conspiracy theories? His denials felt wrong to me, but I had hours to prove my case to him, to get him to break, and I hadn't. I headed back home to Philadelphia for the holidays. No one knows me better than my family, and over the Christmas break they noticed right away that something was off. I was aloof, skipping meals to work on the book proposal and figure out my next moves. Stuck in my own head, going through the paces of my story, I tried to construct a coherent narrative out of interview transcripts and dozens of discarded drafts of my dead premiere piece. With no new revelations from Roger Smith, the ending was a big blank. I also told my father sheepishly that I was running out of money. He generously offered me a loan, as much as I needed to keep me afloat, and I accepted it. I meant it when I promised I'd pay him back. My father was a tax attorney and a law professor, and I realized that I'd never given him a full debriefing on my reporting, as it became increasingly legalistic. That Christmas, I filled him in on everything I'd learned, walking him through my collection of 3-ringed binders, their pages now dog-eared and marked with a rainbow of neon highlights and plastic reference tabs. To my relief, I watched as my sober-minded father transitioned to my thinking. He told me that he never trusted Bugliosi, too arrogant, too flamboyant, and now he was ready to roll up his sleeves, take out his red pen, and help me in the best way he knew how, by arguing. By arguing with the U.S. government for records. With his legal knowledge, he helped me fill out new FOIA requests and file appeals to old ones. In the coming months, and for several years, he accomplished what I'd been unable to, forcing unwilling bureaucrats to fill in redacted documents and release information in dribs and drabs. It wasn't enough, of course, to fill in all the gaps, but it got me closer to the truth, and it would have never been possible if I hadn't won over my old, buttoned-up dad. He believed in what I'd found. He had the same questions I did, especially about the parole board's reluctance to release Manson's file. Why were they hiding all this? Everything about this case should be publicly available, he thought. His skepticism kept me going. After the new year, he drove me to the airport so I could fly back to LA. I'll never forget the father-son pep talk he gave me. It doesn't matter to us, he said, if you're never able to provide all of this. The fact is that you tried so hard is all that matters to us. I headed back to the West Coast feeling reinvigorated, aware of how lucky I was to have my family behind me. At least, I thought, I could have my book out in time for the 40th anniversary of the murders in 2009. There we go. And there we are. Come back tomorrow for chapter 11, Mind Control. Off the deep end is how it starts. Thank you guys for being here with me and for being patient while I had to go track down my charger. Thank you for helping me look up words I don't know. Thank you for sticking with me to the end. And I hope to see you tomorrow. You guys, I'm tired. Amazing, Dakota. Thank you. Happy day, Craig. I'm glad you're back. Did you watch yesterday's? Did you see me talking to you? I was like, no, don't go. Yes, have a peaceful night. Elias. I used to work with somebody named Elias. He's actually the singer of Nonpoint, and I worked for Nonpoint for quite a few years. Do you guys remember Nonpoint? Yes, say your prayers. I like that third step prayer. It's one of those where you ask God to use you, and thy will be done always. That's okay. I'm glad you were here. I appreciate you guys. This is my special me time, so I'm happy to share it with like-minded people who are willing to talk through some stuff and listen to me stammer and stutter and cough and burp and fart. But it was the chair today. You guys are the best. You do? Oh. I need using? I'm good. If I rebuild some books? What you mean? What should we do next, you guys? We're almost done. I mean, we're not almost done, but we're getting through it in good time. I think because I'm doing each chapter at a time instead of just pieces. Instead of just 1 hour takes. We're getting through it. This is really a good book. Anyway, 1984. Ooh. 1984. Should we do a back-to-back, like, double feature, 1984 and Animal Farm? I wonder, I do that with my kids. Would that be too much? I read a chapter from 2 books to them. I like it because it helps them, like, sort through their recall in story format, and I like that we get to talk about and think about 2 different subjects as we wind down together all snugly at night. The Road to Wagon Pier was one of Orwell's much better read. You have 1984? That's okay. Have you read Animal Farm? What about The Road to Wagon Pier? I haven't even heard of that, Elias. Have you seen me before, or did you just stumble upon this book club? Tweeter. Yeah. You ever took a trip down YouTube Live? Yes. I will check it out. I'll put it on the list too. I have a, it's linked in the, you're a stumbler. Awesome. Well, welcome. And if you subscribe and you catch me again, I will be so happy to see you again. Thanks. That's nice. I don't always get that kind of reaction. I appreciate it. And Tweeter, what do you think? You gonna stick around, or did you just stumble in and I'm not even reading, we're just chatting? Oh, we're over 2 hours, 2 hours and 13 minutes. I don't know what I was just crunching. Cheers, Craig. Cheers. All right, y'all. It is 2:30 in the morning where I'm at, 2:20. I was exaggerating. I'm still gonna be up for like an hour or 2. We're gonna get up and go to breakfast. We're gonna probably we're in the cities in Minnesota. We drove for a couple hours today to get here, and tomorrow we're gonna go to the museum. Should I live stream members? Should I do a members only live stream tomorrow? I don't know if we're going to Museum of Science or History, or maybe both. I don't know. We'll see. And then Mall of America on Saturday, because today's never mind. I don't want to sort through it with my brains. All right, y'all. Thanks for being here. One more time around the studio. Let's see. It's pretty cool. It's way cooler than my vintage antique bar that I've been sitting at. Yes, tweeter. Dudette, I love that. That's old school. Deja vu. All right, y'all. I'll see you later. Here too, Animal Farm added to my list. Abigail suggested another. What is it? What was the other one Abby suggested? I'm so glad. If I send you a track, will you lay anything over it? What? I mean, maybe. Find me on a social. All my stuff is linked at the top of my channel. Yippee-ki-yay. Grady. That's funny. So, Grady's a guitar tech for Dimebag, and Dimebag would always say, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Anyway. Huh. You screenshot it, though. I get that. I do that, and then I can't. What do you mean? You think you know me, Grady? You're not champion, are you? Are you the dragon? Grady, you just hit back real quick, and now you're just letting it linger. Come on now. I just left Texas. No, I'm not in California. I'm in Minnesota currently, in the nuisance and ghosts of the Mississippi jam space. Where do you know me from? Interesting. Are you a guitar tech? Are you a tech? Could be. Maybe if you squint. Interesting. I think the Grady I know lives in Arlington, Texas. So, where is Huntsville? I lived in the top of Texas. I know Dallas is North Texas. Darling. Well, who are you? Are you in what? You're in California or what, Craig? Where do you know me from? Yes, you are a guitar tech. I almost thought, are you not a luthier? Wichita Falls. Oh, so we're kind of neighbors. I'm in Wisconsin now. Right on the border, so we can, like, come get no sales tax here in Minnesota. So we're gonna Mall of America big time. You can't leave me like that, Grady. Who else is here? Don't be shy. A remodeler. That's funny. Just on your way, though. In no time. See, Tweeter's hooked. That's funny. I mean, I used to work in music. Now I just mom hardcore. Restoring magic wands. Mm-hmm. Oh, my doggo. There's the Billy Goat. Oop. Are you my Billy Goat? Good girl. Oh. What do you think about road trips? She used to have stinky breath, and then I started giving her 2 chicken feet raw. Thanks for the burp. And now I give her 2 chicken feet raw. She crunches the bones and it cleared up her tartar. Animal Farm and Chaos. Lanta, the book you've been reading. Finding Both Tamara. All right. Yes. So, I mean, you can go back. All my playlists and the books that I've read, I hope Chaos is. I haven't been on my laptop in a little while, I guess, to at least organize and make sure everything's organized. But it should play oldest to newest. And I think if it isn't, you can make it play that way. And we can go through it together that way after the fact. And if you watch any of those after the fact, please look at, I just noticed I had a bug bite on my stinking eyelid. Rude. That was rude. We were digging up, we put in a little gravel patch for a drive, or like a parking spot for a trailer. Anyway, so we were out there in the bugs. My kiddos got it worse than me not too long ago, but I feel like it's the same kind of bug. It went for the face and the neck. And since I had my hairs all over me, I think it protected my neck. It just got me on the face. I have some on my cheek and one on my temple also, which is fun. Anyway, so I guess Grady's out. He's like, I'm gonna make you curious. And then I'm gonna just leave it at that. I'm so glad to read that. Dakota said, this has been the highlight of my night. Thank you so much. Thank you for making it mine. This is my little time for me. And I've heard that from others, that they get to sit and either relax or listen to me while they're doing stuff. And I love sharing time with you guys. You think you know Grady? I bet you do. You recognize him from across the way. I bet you do. I mean, I know a Grady, the Grand Dragon. Mm-hmm. Cool. 40 likes. I think that's the most likes I've gotten on a live stream. I do have to say, I've been seeing some bigger numbers, and that's really cool. And I feel like a lot of you are like just swiping, and then you stop on me and you're like, hey, what's she doing? Why is she talking about Manson? It's just the coolest stuff to go through and examine after the fact. I mean, cool, it's staggering, it's stunning to know how deep these things can run. They are the craziest stories. Like, what a time to be alive back then, even though like you can say that now as profoundly, only for different reasons. You know, it's crazy. They call it the Summer of Love, and then they called BLM the Summer of Love. With all its fiery destruction, it was just mostly peaceful protests, and like all of Minneapolis was on fire. They tried to make that a thing in Denver too, and that's what got me thinking, maybe they're using this against us. I think the last true protest, other than, I mean, there's some, but like the No Kings stuff, now that like with the Iran war, there's not another No Kings answer to this. There's no, anyway. Polar opposite of love. Yeah, get out, Brad. You're boring. Anyway, there are new folks too. Oh, look at that. Yeah, beat it. I know the algorithm. Now you're gonna see more of my stuff. Hopefully you'll see some posts though, and it'll get you a little more talkative. Oh, Tweeter, what did you say? Oh, you took back what you said. All right. That's all right. Anyway, I think I'll go to bed. All right, y'all, get some good sleep. Have a good day. Thanks for being here all the way. Heck yeah. See, my man Peace is a Leo also. I'm a Libra, and I have 6 Libra placements. So, anyway, all right, we'll talk to you later. I'll see you tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Okay, bye.